60 years. Very nearly 60 years. That's how long I've been watching Doctor Who. Yep, that's how old I am. And yet even now, after all these years, Doctor Who is still able, somehow, to pluck something out of the ether and put onto the screen, something which is completely left of centre, completely left field, completely different. Something that's so completely different, it couldn't be more like Doctor Who. Let's talk about 73 Yards. Well, welcome back to my world of stuff. My name is Paul Mount. I've been watching Doctor Who for 60 years, as I said in the intro, and I'm always stunned when it does something completely unexpected. It takes a different route telling its story. It just breaks all its own rules, bearing in mind Doctor Who doesn't really have many rules. Let's talk about 73 Yards. This is last night's story, the fourth in the new series, the first starring Ncuti Gatwa and particularly Millie Gibson. Written by, of course, the man himself, Mr. Russell T Davies. Now, a few months ago, he was talking about this episode and he said he felt it was one of the best things he's ever written. Now, let's think about that. This is the man who, outside of Doctor Who, has written It's a Sin. He's written the brilliant and underrated Years and Years. He wrote Bob and Rose, again another underrated series, and of course he wrote the landmark Queer as Folk, a show which sort of changed the TV landscape in Britain. He wrote A Very English Scandal, he wrote Nolly. He's got a massive, but quite selective CV of fantastic bits of television, and to suggest that one particular episode of Doctor Who is, for him, one of the best things he's ever written, that's quite a boast. I think he may be right. This is up there with the best of Russell T Davies. It's also up there with the best of modern Doctor Who, and I say that unequivocally because I just sat completely captivated by this extraordinary story that had so much to say about so many things. As you can see, we have a visitor. Say hello, Rosie. I've not seen anything like this in Doctor Who before, and yet it always felt like Doctor Who. It always felt like part of the Doctor Who canon. The story then, as we know, and it sets its stall out quite quickly in being a cold opening. There's no Doctor Who credit sequence here. This just goes in for the kill. The Doctor and Ruby land on a Welsh cliff top, which is actually near Tenby in West Wales. And they come across what looks like some sort of supernatural rune or magical circle made of little artifacts and odds and sods and a strange scroll. Ruby picks up the scroll, which says R.I.P. Mad Jack, and the Doctor disappears. In the distance, 73 yards away, is a strange old woman who's making strange sort of gestures, but she won't come any closer. The Doctor's disappeared. Ruby doesn't know what to do. She wanders into the nearby village after an encounter with a hiker, played by Susan Twist again. The hiker, incidentally, goes off to speak to the old woman, and the hiker runs off screaming and terrified because of something that the old woman has apparently said to her. Ruby's a bit baffled, obviously, and she wanders off to the nearby village to try and find some help or in search of the Doctor. When she gets to the village, she arrives in a quintessential creepy, we don't like strangers here tavern full of some colourful Welsh stereotypes. In talking about this episode, Russell T Davies said it was a Welsh folk horror story, and I think he did that as a complete misdirection, of course, because as we know, the story wasn't that at all, but this part certainly was. She goes into the inn where she's met with some sort of amusement by the locals, who take the mickey out of her slightly. And the big twist here is that what we're built up to think that there's something terrible stalking the darkness isn't quite that. This part of the story is quite clever because this is a complete misdirect. This is a sort of commentary on English attitudes towards the Welsh being a bit backwards, not having phone payment machines and not understanding about the modern world. And I think it must be set some slight time in the future because she's charged £5 for a glass of Coke, and the room that she's been offered £65 a night. I don't know if that's going rate for hotels in the middle of Wales. I don't know. So I think it's a nice play on the idea that the Welsh are sort of regarded as slightly inferior intellectual beings than the English. When there's no sign of the Doctor after a few days, Ruby heads home. She gets the train home. And constantly, 73 yards away, in the village, she terrifies one of the locals in the pub. But she's everywhere that Ruby goes. It's quite interesting. There's a very short scene on the train where she's heading home. And in every field she looks in, everywhere outside is the woman, standing there, gesturing. But she never comes any closer than 73 yards. Ruby gets home, reunited with her mother and her grandmother. She and her mother go out into the street to see the woman who's standing at the end of the street. Ruby's mother, Carla, approaches the woman, and then Ruby's mother runs off screaming. She wants nothing to do with Ruby. She completely cuts her off. Ruby is again an orphan, if you like. Time marches on. Ruby has a meeting with Kate Lethbridge-Stewart. Very nice to see Gemma Redgrave again in a little cameo scene. But once again, the woman terrifies Kate and the unit troops sent to engage with this woman who's standing in the middle of a street. Time marches on. Time changes and the tone of the story changes. It now becomes a sort of a political thriller with a new character, Roger ap Gwilym, played with quiet malevolence by Aneurin Barnard. He's a character who's referenced in the very first scene by the Doctor as a Prime Minister who nearly brought the Earth to nuclear annihilation, which is an important point because this happens just before the Doctor disappears. Ruby becomes involved with him in his strange campaign. He boasts about nuclear weapons, and Ruby begins to realise what is going on. She understands what she has to do. And we see little vignettes of her life in the way that Russell T Davies does so well. Moments in her life as she becomes 25, then she becomes 40. She has relationships that fall by the wayside because she needs to focus on what she has to do. She realises what she has to do, and she learns that he has certain plans. When the following Saturday there's a huge meeting at the National Stadium in Wales. I think it's called, I don't even know if it's called the Millennium Stadium anymore, where she realises what 73 yards is all about and what she has to do. It is actually, as you've heard, very difficult to sort of sum up what this story is about because it's about so much. It is this sort of little parody of the Welsh, the attitude to Wales that people from outside Wales have. It's also a little bit about cancel culture. I think there's something there about how this woman says something. We don't know what that something is at any point, and Ruby's then cancelled by all the people that she knows. They don't want anything to do with her. And that, I think, itself is a commentary on cancel culture, in that we very often don't really know what it is that causes people to be cancelled. People take words the wrong way. People interpret things their particular way and then wipe somebody out of existence. Then, of course, you've got this whole political thing about the power of politics and the manipulation of politics, and, quite interestingly, the suggestion that Roger ap Gwilym is a monster, because we see a scene where he appears to take a fancy to one of the young ladies working for his organisation, and then it appears that something happens at some point, because when he wins the campaign and becomes the Prime Minister, this girl is sitting quietly looking shattered and devastated, and she describes him as a monster. This is subtle stuff. This is good, big stuff for a family adventure series being screened at 10 to 7. The idea that this man has done something monstrous to this girl. And throughout the episode, we get sort of suggestions of Ruby's adult life. She has boyfriends, she has a sex life. These are things you don't often get mentioned, even in a version of it which is a bit more mature. It's certainly pulling up its boots over the last couple of weeks from the slightly wacky opening episodes. I mean, I adored this episode. I just watched this transfixed because it was so different. It broke all the rules that Doctor Who has, and bearing in mind it doesn't have that many rules, it can do anything. This did completely do that, with a towering performance from Millie Gibson. I mean, she is absolutely sensational. Doctor Who is so lucky to get her performance in this. And bearing in mind, this was the first thing she filmed for Doctor Who. The reason Ncuti Gatwa isn't in it, in case you didn't know, he was at the time still finishing off his work on the last series of Sex Education. He was only available very briefly to do, I think, one day's filming on the cliffs. So this is Ruby's episode. This is Millie's episode. This is an episode, although I'm sure she'd read the earlier script, she hadn't filmed anything yet. This is the episode where she creates Ruby. This is the episode where we find Ruby exactly as she is in the episodes that she filmed later, which I think is astonishing. For an 18-year-old actress to be able to do that is pretty astonishing. She's a real find. And I know she was in Coronation Street and was highly regarded there, but this is a whole other level performance from her to carry this whole episode. She's in pretty much every scene. And her performance, she says so much with her face and her eyes and the comprehension that she understands what's happening and what she has to do. It's quite breathtaking. I was absolutely stunned by this episode. I thought it was a magnificent piece of writing, a genuine Doctor Who classic. And I don't think, much as I love The Devil's Chord, I think this is the first classic of the Ncuti Gatwa era, which unfortunately he's not in it very much. But I think this is an episode that really shows how great a writer Russell T Davies is and why he came back, and it justifies him coming back. Because people have been saying, it doesn't feel the same as first time. It doesn't feel as if he's firing on all cylinders. It feels a bit half-hearted. And I can see why people would think that. I don't necessarily agree, because I think The Devil's Call was extraordinarily inventive. But I think with this, you can see he's really flexing his narrative muscles and saying, well, this is Doctor Who, but going into some strange dark places. I mean, when you think about 3 weeks ago we had Space Babies, which was so totally different. And I'm still not sure Space Baby was the best episode to launch this year. I think most people agree on that. But this was just astonishing. And one of the things I particularly like about it, I've looked at some of the online discourse and chatter about it. A lot of people haven't fully understood it, which is absolutely fine. Because I think now we're dabbling with the supernatural. We are dabbling with things we don't understand. The Doctor is very clearly going down that route. The fact that people aren't able to join the dots and create a story that goes from A to B flawlessly, I think is a strength of this episode, because it makes you ask questions. It makes you interpret the story your own way. And I think that you may have a different interpretation of things to me. And I think that could be the case across viewers generally. We don't know what the old woman said. Russell Davies has said he's never going to say what the old woman said, and I don't think he even knows. But I think it is this cancel culture thing that they say something so terrible about Ruby that people want to have nothing to do with her and they want to completely distance themselves from her. It's a very clear statement that these scenes are saying. What the woman's saying doesn't matter. I think she's saying something different to all of them. Something appalling, something too horrible to contemplate. So we don't really ever want to know, because sometimes things not known are better than knowing about things. An example of that I'm going to throw at you now is from Gavin and Stacey, the comedy series. One of the sort of threads through that is the fishing trip with Rob Brydon's character Bryn and his nephew, where something happened on the fishing trip that they can't talk about, but everybody knows about and everybody sort of doesn't talk about. And I think it's the same with this. I think there's a Gavin and Stacey Christmas special coming out, and a lot of people saying, let's find out what happened on the fishing trip. I hope we find out. But to find out would ruin the joke, and it would ruin the mystery of it. It is a mystery, and it's best left that way. And I think it's absolutely the same with this. We don't need to know what the old woman said. Only we can gather from what we don't know is that she said something terrible about Ruby, which turned everybody she knows against her. It's cancel culture, basically. Yeah, all the political stuff I think is very good as well. Russell's so good at this. This was very evocative of years and years about this powerful politician who is a threat to not just the country but possibly the world with what he's going to do and what he's planning to do. And Ruby, having remembered what the Doctor said when they arrived in Wales, when she gets into his coterie, she understands what he wants to do, and she understands then what she has to do, and she uses 73 yards against him in a beautiful payoff. Yeah, it's just a fantastic episode. I mean, it really is absolutely fantastic. Again, there's some mystery about the very end of the episode, but I think if you watch it very carefully, what I think the events at the beginning have done, this is, again, my interpretation, what I think the events at the beginning have done, where the Doctor steps on this talisman thing, it has created a slightly different timeline. And at the end of the episode, and again, we see Ruby living her life. At the end of the episode, she's an 8-year-old woman in a care home or hospital, and she sees the old woman appearing in front of her, not 73 yards away. And she reaches out to the old woman and she says, "Don't step." And that somehow has an effect of throwing her back to the moment when the Doctor steps on the talisman and he doesn't do it. And I think that's a pivotal moment as well. Again, how you interpret that moment is entirely up to you. But I think it's Ruby understanding that she has the power to change things. She can change things. This old woman, being an older version of her, she's able to influence what she does as a young woman because she knows what, from the older woman, what she did and what happened. It is very complicated, I think, if you sort of try and rationalise it. But I think it becomes less complicated if you stop and think and you make those logic leaps. You have to make certain leaps because the story isn't telling you everything, which I think is great. And I don't mind that. I like television. I like any fiction that makes me think and makes me join the dots. Not, I will point out, to the extent that Stephen Moffat often did. I have to have my regular Stephen Moffat rant here, that he just left massive gaps in stories and massive gaps in plot holes that you had to pole vault across to pull them together. Here, there's just little things where you have to go, well, it must be this, it might be that, it must be this, it must be that. That's great storytelling for me. I think that's what I think is so good about this episode. It really makes you work with it. It's just terrific. I have not enough superlatives for this. It is absolutely sensational. I really love this episode. And unlike Boom last week, where I felt, well, I've seen that, I know what happens, not much happens, I don't need to rewatch it. This, I want to go back and rewatch because it was beautifully filmed, fantastic sequences in it. And I think this is the first episode where I could see that Disney money that we've heard so much about, because of 10 different locations, lots of very subtle, discreet special effects to suggest the future as Ruby ages and things change. Lots of characters, lots of big cast list for this, lots of extras, lots of big scenes. Not big action scenes, but lots of well-populated exterior scenes. A lot of setups. And I can see that this would have been a much more expensive episode in a more subtle way than it would be if there'd been lots of monsters marching down the street or spaceships. This still looked like a bigger episode, which I loved. 73 yards, I think, is a masterpiece, and I think that seems to be the general opinion. There's always a few moaning minis who will not admit that it was good, even if they thought it was good, because that's not their pitch at the moment. But I think generally this has gone down very well. And I think purely for Millie Gibson's absolutely magnetic performance, this is an absolutely must-watch piece of television, much less Doctor Who. And I'm going to give it, having said it's a masterpiece, I think it's wonderful, because 10 is such a hard thing to prize out of my cold dead hands. I'm going to give it 9.5 out of 10. 9.5 out of 10. Why have I dropped a half? I don't really know. I just don't know. Possibly because the Doctor wasn't in it much, let's say that. But I'm very reluctant to give anything 10 because that suggests a state of perfection which is almost impossible to exist. But I don't know, a brilliant episode, absolutely brilliant. I'm looking forward to next week's episode, Dot and Bubble, because at last we got some Doctor Who monsters, because much as I've enjoyed these episodes, a bit light on the old Doctor Who rubber monsters. We had the Bogeyman in the first episode, nothing since, 3 episodes without a hint of a traditional Doctor Who monster. We had the terrifying Maestro, of course, and we had a very human monster in this episode, who was quite chilling, although we didn't see a great deal of him. So next week we've got proper monsters, and I'm looking forward to seeing what looks like a very Black Mirror-inspired dystopian story set in a domed city. That's Dot and Bubble. Of course, I'll be reviewing that next week. Before I go, just one quick word on ratings. I'm going to just mention the overnight ratings for this particular episode, and they were a marked increase on Boom, which I think had 2.04 million viewers. This had over 500,000 more overnight figures, 2.62, which puts it actually the highest rated overnight episode of the series so far, which is quite heartening because this suggests that we'll be fairly comfortably back over 4 million in the final figures, which will come out a week this Monday. So, I'm very pleased that the figures have gone up. I don't think I'll be doing another ratings video this week because I've done 2 and they've both done very well, and they both gave me lots of subscribers and lots of views and lots of comments, thank you. But I don't want to do it every week because that's a bit lazy. It would be an easy way of getting new subscribers and getting new views and getting comments, and I don't want to just generate stuff for the sake of getting more views and subscribers. I want people to watch this channel because they like it, not because it's briefly clickbait. But there probably will be another ratings video further down the line when we get a broader picture, maybe at the end of the series, about the ratings in general. But I think this is a decent figure in the current landscape. Again, if you've looked at my 2 previous videos, looking at context, I think 2.62 on a Saturday night in May, at the end of May, when the weather's changing, and terrestrial TV viewers are dropping. You've seen the previous videos, you know the points I'm making. And I think 2.62 is not bad, and we're probably looking at 4.2, 4.3 on finals, which, you know, is not bad these days. Right, thank you for watching. Another final point to make, in fact, is about comments. Now, on my ratings thread, I moderate the comments because I know what's coming, and sure enough, most of it came. A lot of people misunderstanding the nature of me moderating and calling it censorship, which it wasn't. As I've said before, I don't really want on this channel those stupid RIP Doctor Who comments, those "it was shite" comments. That's meaningless. So I always delete those. They get deleted straight away because I'm not interested in having a comment section full of that rubbish. I like interesting commentary and constructive, intelligent comments, and the same applies here. I'm not going to moderate these comments, but I will still delete any of the nonsense that comes up, although it will appear briefly. But it would be nice to get a comment. But please, if you want to talk about Doctor Who, let's talk like adults and sensible people. Let's talk like those YouTube numbnuts with their clickbait-driven agendas, please. Let's talk sensibly and have a chat rather than just shouting out stupid slogans that these people have generated for their own benefit. Right, that's that off my chest again. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Please like it. Please subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment down below with that caveat. I'll see you soon. Until I do, keep taking the stuff.